Welcome to this month, the February meeting of the North Bay Electric Auto Association, or the Electric Vehicle Association. And before we begin, I'm going to jump ahead while we allow some more people to join. I'm going to share something different, a submission by Ray. Let's see if I get this right. All right, we have to thank Ray for that submission.
That was great.
Cecilia recognized this one. Cecilia, do you know when that one was done by SNL?
I know it was a few years ago. I don't remember exactly when.
Yeah, it was a while back. I remember seeing it once before.
Yeah. Okay, let me share.
I credit Mercedes-Benz for their imagination.
All right, so back to the agenda. It's our normal agenda. And today, Sonja is going to be talking about light-duty trucks, and I should also give David credit on this too, and both of them. I didn't realize they were working on it together. We'll start with introductions, who you are, and how do you get around. And, you know, in the on-site meetings, we've always done this from the front row to the back row. And so I was always introduced last. So today we're going to start from the back row and work our way to the front row, and hopefully nobody comes into the back row towards the end of the meeting or the beginning of the meeting here. If anybody notices that, yell out another person's name. So therefore, late but not last, or yeah, last so far, Caleb, who are you? I don't know if he's fully connected yet. You're on mute, Caleb.
Incognito.
Yeah. We'll give him 2 more seconds. Maybe the boys are all around him.
Hey, sorry.
All right. Oh, there you are. Yeah, a little bit louder.
Sorry. Caleb, I have a 2015 BMW i3. It's right there.
You're in the garage now, or what?
Yeah, there it is.
All right, thanks. David Harris.
Okay, well, I didn't get my video turned on, but David Harris, and I'm driving a Bolt, a 2017 Bolt that now has a new battery pack, which is, you know, it's slightly larger than the original battery pack, but I haven't been able to get anybody to say whether it charges any faster.
Okay. How long did it take to get it?
Well, it was in the dealership for 3 days. Once, you know, when you start the count on this, it's the recall started when, like last year, right?
Oh, okay, that was my question.
Right.
All right, thanks. Cecilia.
I drive a 2018 Model 3. I'm located in West County.
Okay. Zena, we don't see you. Are you in a place where you can say who you are and what you drive, or how you get around?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Taylor Schweiting in Sebastopol. I have a Honda Insight, a hybrid, pretty old, but I love it. And yeah, in town, I try to only use my bike. It's not always happening, but it happens, yeah. So yeah, bike and Honda Insight.
All right, Mike Newell.
Morning, everybody. Mike Newell, live in Santa Rosa. Still driving my 2011 Leaf just about every day. Not very far, but every day. And apart from that, we have a 2020 Kia Niro.
Okay, and I'm trying to get around to drive the 2022 Kia EV6 when they finally say, "Hey, come down and drive one." John, you're on mute.
So anyway, yeah, I'm John Palmerly, and driving a Geo Metro with a Leaf motor, and hopefully I'll drive my truck soon still.
Okay. And is the shop pretty much open these days, or how are things going?
It is. We're there. We've worn masks in the shop for over 2 years or so, or I guess about 2 years now. Right? So my face is starting to become misshapen, nose rash, etc.
Right. Sonja.
Hi, everybody. Sonja. I have a Tesla Model 3. It's a 2019, and it only has 22,000 miles on it. So, we continue to have fewer places to travel. And I originally got it because I thought I'd have to commute to Berkeley on a regular basis for my work. And so that's been a real carbon capture situation over the last 2.5 years.
All right. Brad.
Yeah, my name is Brad Morrison. I live in Santa Rosa, and I mostly get around by, well, not so much anymore. I used to mostly get around by bike, but I actually started a new job this past week. So I've been thinking in the past week much more about getting either a new to me or a new electric vehicle, and thinking about, whether the incentives are there federally in terms of tax credits and things like that. So prices seem to be high for used cars right now.
Yeah.
So anyways, just tossing around those ideas in my head. But yeah, I currently drive a 2004 Honda Civic Hybrid.
Think about giving us a short talk on your search as a non-EV driver, becoming an EV driver sometime in the future. I have had people contacting me recently saying they wanted to buy used EVs, but then found that they get a new one and the price was the same.
Is that considering, well, because I don't know if the tax credits apply to most of the manufacturers these days. So
no, they do.
And that was a huge.
Many others can jump in on that.
Okay.
We may have something later I don't know if we have later in the presentation on that. Yeah. Bill. Mute. Nope, still on mute, Bill. Bill, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. We have the 2016 Kia Soul for quite a while now, and we still love it. And did someone just mention they're going to come out with another Kia Soul EV? I hope. Anyway, what it is probably about the shortest EV, and that's for us has a couple of positive points. And I may have to leave a little early because my 1950 pickup truck hasn't started for 2 weeks, and I use it to do work things. And I've got I lost my regular mechanic for it, and so I found a new mechanic who also deals with cars on Medicare.
Medicare. Okay, very good. All right, Woody.
Hi, good morning, all. Woody Hastings, boring as hell. Still the same old 2013 Chevy Volt with a V as in Victor. But really hardly ever drive it still. So just mostly just working from home.
And you're still on to speak next month, you think?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Mark.
Still driving the 2013 RAV4 EV and still liking it.
Okay. Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie Dolan, and live in Trenton, and still driving my 3, and my wife's driving the Leaf.
Is Trenton a real place or just a road?
Well, it used to have a post office and everything, but it's just really nothing more than an intersection now.
Yeah. Ray, and thank you for the video, Ray.
You're welcome. Ray Alden here, senior citizen.
still getting around to acres round in my golf cart.
Ray, I got appointed to the MTC Policy Advisor Council as a senior. And I'm trying to compare the two of us. I'm going, wait, I'm not senior, Ray's senior.
Well, I'm a member of the 3-digit club now.
Okay, congratulations, man.
Good to see you all again.
Yeah, Lowell.
Yeah, I'm still getting around to my 2014 Tesla Model S, which I got from Bruce about 2.5 years ago. I took it in for a service at the Tesla service facility in Corte Madera this past week. They asked me to bring it in at 9:15 a.m. And when I got there, they told me they wouldn't have it back. I couldn't have it back for 3 days. But the actual service, which was replacing the eMMC chip in the center console because it's been failing lately, and this was a recall, and the other was replacing the modem, which is a 3G modem and is going to be outmoded in a matter of a few weeks with an LTE modem. Anyway, that all took about 3 hours, but so the car just sat in their parking lot for a day or two before they finally got around to fixing it. And then I picked it up on Wednesday, late Wednesday, and then it was all Uber. That's how I got back and forth. They gave me Uber credits, and I took an Uber for the first time in a very long time. I got to see what it was like to ride around in an Uber, but
Right,
so
great.
that was fun.
All right, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm just going to focus. I'm having an EV fire sale, not because of a fire. It's because I'm trying to get them out of my driveway so I can actually move around a little bit. But I just thought I'd mention, I'll just focus on one. I'm in the process of, I was just in the process of getting a tire pressure sensor replaced when I bought the Roadster VIN number 101 from Allen. The plate number was TSLA 101. Took me 3 months, but I've got a really cool San Juan Islands vanity plate that's got the same TSLA 101. And it's kind of a nice selling feature, except between that and the snow, it mysteriously stopped running. It's got a red fault light. So now it's going to be a real exciting adventure because I had to call them to I've got an icon now of the Roadster in my phone app. This is the way you have to deal with everything. And it doesn't do anything other than show the icons. So I've got an appointment March 1st, and I've got to figure out how to get it down there to have it towed by a commercial tower. It'll be like a $2,500 trip. So anyway, it'll be an adventure, but it's a fun car, and the Model 3 is the primary get around car, and there's no place to go up here, so it's very low mileage.
Okay.
So what are you asking for that car?
Which one? The Roadster?
Roadster, yeah.
Well, I would sell it for what I have in it at the moment, and that means it's not running at the moment, but I'll probably keep it for another year. And I've offered it to Martin Eberhardt. He's got 2 of them. He's got a place up here. He spends most of his time in California, but he has number 2 because Elon insisted on having number 1. And and then he got a newer one closer to I've forgotten the president of the Golden Gate had a really nice gray 2013 Roadster. I think that was the last year, but mine's right in the middle. It's a 2008.
Did yours get the upgrade?
Yeah, Alan did that pretty close to when he picked up the car. I think in Healthy. I forget English Town where Lotus Factory is.
Okay, all right, good. All right, David Heacock.
Hi, I'm David Heacock. I live in Fairfield. I drive a 1985 Avante conversion, and it's funny because that video was perfect. I just completed my long range Alta test and drove at 116 miles, and at somewhere about 114 or so, it started getting all kinds of red lights, and the low voltage cutoff number was coming on and flashing on the screen. So I figured out that all those systems seem to work. They warn you that something's going on, but to extend my range, I guess I could just change the low voltage cutoff numbers in a computer and I'll get more range. But I'll probably figure that it's around 100 to 105 miles safely with my new battery pack. So.
All right, and I'm Jerry Glazer, and I live in Sebastopol, and I'm driving my Nissan Leaf 2018 model, and I discovered that now that the garage is not available since we're building on top of it, I've been parking the car outside in the sub-freezing weather, and that one little rock that hit my windshield, for those of you not from, actually everybody's from California, it's below freezing and then it's 75 degrees at the end of the day. So now I have a big split across my windshield because of the changing temperature. So I've got to get the windshield replaced. And windshield replacements are interesting too, just to throw that in for new cars. The guy apologized. He said, it's normally $200, but yours has an embedded camera in it. And we'll find in most of the EVs that we have embedded cameras and other sensors in our windshields, which is making it more expensive, including notes from him saying, make sure nothing heavier than 30 pounds is inside the car because I need to align the windshield so that the camera is looking in the right direction. So pretty interesting stuff. All right. Chapter business. First of all, I meant to mention this on the first slide, thanking Sonja and David for the presentation and Zeno for jumping in and doing all of the news. And I'm hoping that we can do more of that in the future. I have now been doing the news and putting the program together. I look back, it's been 3 years now. That's when Alan started complaining about being president. And we said we'd get a group together to put the program together. And Sonja's done it once, John has done it once, and this time Zeno did the news section for us. We need to find a way to do this so that not one or two members end up with the heavy loads. And we'll talk about part of that as we go through the meeting. We've got 33 paying members. I think all of you, actually I see one person here who hasn't paid. Check on your membership, make sure it's live. Our balance as of July of 2021 is $6,280 with the EBA. Now, we only know that because Lisa asked for the report. Coordination with the EAA or EVA is not all that easy. You have to do it through phone calls. The website doesn't give us most of the information. I do send the newsletter out just a short letter after this meeting. It'll tell you where to find the video, where to find the presentation. So all the links that we use, you can look at the articles yourself and see if you get more out of them. And also it includes linkages to the chat and some other things that you might be interested in. As well, it reminds you, send articles in so that we have news for the next month. Find a speaker. Woody's going to be up next month. And then after that, we want to see what we can do next, or a video or whatever to include in the meetings. So this is a group effort. Last time around, David Harris brought in Turo and was going to talk about transportation as a service. Kind of light on that part, and probably someday in the future we'll come back to that topic. Returning to Thunderstruck. If my example this last week is anything, I guess we're not going to Thunderstruck really fast. At the county level, we've now gone from just short of 300 new cases a day of COVID, an unbelievable number, down to 75. Just to remind you that 6 months ago, we were down to 4 per 100,000 per day. So we have more ways to go. Luckily, this is no longer a death-threatening disease, but it still is painful. It's time to rotate offices. And we have not yet had a volunteer for vice president. So if you don't want to volunteer yourself, volunteer somebody else. It doesn't matter. I don't care which way you do it. We've got 1 month left to come up with a vice president. It will be president in the following year. I can tell you that the workload as a president is negligible. The workload putting the programs together, that can be considerable. I mean, that's a few hours a month. But the president portion so far, especially during COVID, has been practically nothing. Nobody's asking us any questions, and I think Alan did a lot more. Whoops, hang on, I went the wrong way. Sorry. And Lisa Blair asked if we can find somebody else to take the place of treasurer. She and Stan are not that involved in the club any longer. And she thinks we should get somebody else to volunteer. I believe we have a volunteer. Do we have a volunteer?
I was sure there was somebody.
Yeah, I was sure there was somebody too.
I'm waiting for that person to speak up.
Yeah.
Well, how much does it pay? I guess I would be willing to, since we probably are required to have a treasurer, and considering that I'm about 1,000 miles away, if I can do it remotely, I would volunteer, I guess, but I would kind of like to get an idea of what Lisa looks at as past responsibilities, what things take the most time, and are there any issues with like depositing checks anymore? I know you can do a lot of stuff by phone, and I do have a bank. I've maintained my bank account with Redwood Credit Union, so maybe that's a plus. I don't know if you banked with them, but
why don't you contact Lisa directly so you can get the information from her?
Okay.
And I don't think there's any checks to be deposited. I think that the major thing for us is what Mike might have some input on. How do you pay for the donuts and the coffee that we haven't bought?
Well, I could mail you back my first batch of homemade donuts.
Yeah, but I think Mike has been the one who has interacted the most with Lisa. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So actually, there is no individual account for our chapter. All the banking is done through national. So to be a club, we have to have a treasurer as one of the named officers, but they're the ones who technically would be making requests for either for making purchases or reimbursements or stuff like that. But like when we used to have our events, I would always like just copy Lisa on just make the request directly and copied Lisa. So I know that in the last 10 years, she really hasn't done too much, but we needed a name, and she's been serving that role. But if any of us really wanted to ask, how much money we've got, I think any named officer could do it, but that's also the role of the treasurer would be to interact with national on that kind of thing.
So the kinds of expenditures that I do think that we'll come up with in the future, besides going back to coffee and donuts once we get on site. One is, I believe that we all agree we'd like to continue the virtual aspect of the club meeting. So especially if Bruce becomes our treasurer, that he can participate in the meetings. And I think we need more equipment in order to do that. And also, we were doing special events, and the money for the special events and funding that would be the other place where we start tapping some of those funds. And I'd love to get a different group than me looking at the equipment. I've looked at a few things that are about $1,000 to make the virtual meetings fairly useful, just from new equipment that's showing up as a result of COVID. There's a whole bunch of new equipment that's showing up. The camera that I'm using right here was one that I experimented with, and I thought maybe I'd have the club buy it, but I like it so much I'm keeping it myself. But there's others which are made for conference rooms and can do 360 and can zoom in on the people who are talking, things like that. So those are the kinds of expenditures that we might have in the future. And we did explore the electric pickup truck as an option too. In the past, Bruce 2 years ago, Alan, I believe this year, paid for the Zoom license. And so I believe this year coming, we should make sure that the club pays for the Zoom license. We can do that through the national, and through national, if we do it through national, we actually get more for the same payment. They have a special deal with Zoom for the 200 some odd bucks you guys paid. We'd actually get more capability on Zoom. Okay. Okay, leave this topic. I just also coordination with National, Sonja and Alan and I spent considerable time telling them about the exchange of officers. And I finally found the site to get through to tell you that Bruce is president, according to the EAA, and not me. Now, Sonja, you got to be vice president. And Lisa ends up as the treasurer. There were no EV events and offers that I ran into, and news and interesting stuff. And I'm going to stop right here since Zeno put this together and Sonja's there, and I may jump in, but would you guys be willing to do the talking on this and tell me to go to the next slide?
Well, I can support Sonja, but she's more knowledgeable about everything here. That's
I'll do my best, and you can fill if you'd like. So I know Jerry's probably the one who kind of pulled the battery electric bus information together. More battery electric buses joining the transit fleets. So we've got 1,400 battery electric buses right now in California. I recall that Lancaster, California was kind of the early adopter here. And for a conservative town or city, Lancaster, just learned that there was so many great economics around this, and just you don't learn about pilots that kind of bloom or blossom like that very often, but in this case, it really did. So in addition to that, the battery electric buses requiring operational changes due to charging cycles, range limits, infrastructure, and heating challenges and so forth. Jerry, you might have to fill me in on that one.
Okay, I can. Basically, this is something, and Caleb and I have talked about this before, along with Sonja, on the challenge with fleets, is that when they get the new battery electric buses, they expect they're going to work exactly the same as internal combustion vehicles. And then they go to plug them in the wall and find out they have the wrong power, or they don't have enough power, or things like that. And then they have actually this happened in Santa Clara County. Sonoma County. They ordered the bus for Cloverdale. And they use a yard in Santa Rosa. So they're going to drive 40 miles up to Cloverdale to run the bus all day long and then drive 40 miles back again. They used more than half of the range of the vehicle just to get on and off route. So they didn't think about it before they started ordering the bus for some reason. And that plus you have to have enough power at the site. And then heating turns out to be a challenge. Caleb and I ran into this for school buses in Long Island. They open and close the doors all the time. And every time they do that, all that nice warm air in the bus goes out, and you don't have a lot of wasted heat through that gasoline that's not terribly efficient. And so you're using battery power to keep heating the vehicle. That's all kinds of stuff that they need to learn how to figure out. And I was happy to see in this article also that all of this stuff was highlighted, as well as training for the staff and stuff.
Do you or Caleb know if any battery electric buses are made with seat warmers yet?
None that I know of. Caleb?
No, I'm not aware of any.
Yeah.
There was you should do it.
I didn't share it recently, but I did see about a month ago that there's a case study of, I want to say it was Lion, for a Canadian deployment of electric school buses. And it talked about their efficiencies in heating and things like that. And it seemed like it was a successful implementation.
But that's a curious question, Sonja. I've never heard anybody ask that question before. And Caleb and I have been there challenged with trying to figure out how to fit electric heaters of all sorts into electric buses. And we're looking at all these large central units. Nobody thought about the orthogonal approach that you just mentioned of why not just heat the seats?
Make a nice ski trip.
Yeah.
The picture that I found shows this pantograph charger.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I had to look that up when you put the slide together to find out what a pantograph was, and then I saw.
I see it now. Thanks, Zeno. So, Jerry's point about becoming more sophisticated in learning how to replace a windshield with a camera in it. I feel like a lot of these maintenance employees, they'll learn a pattern around a new piece of equipment and it's the new normal for them. But they do have to learn all those little things, right? And so how great, this little pantograph charger. So that's the word for it, dropping down onto the plate.
Yeah. But, Caleb, what's the name of the company down in Lancaster? Starts with a P, and that's what they have at each one of their stops.
Oh, for those.
Proterra, right? Proterra.
Proterra. Yeah, they're using some of them. Well, most of them are using Proterra. The pantograph system is pretty unique in that it's not a new concept, but it'll auto align within a certain range. So it makes it easy for them to line it up. It's a little bit more. You get a lot more power out of it than if you were to do like a wireless charging pad in the same space, because you do get those direct contact charging ports. So.
Hey, by the way, if you can get your microphone a little bit closer and a little bit louder, it would be good.
Okay.
Okay.
So I do know about this slide a little bit.
I know you do.
I think I can speak to it. So lower MSRP and income caps for the CBRP. And I don't know if I'm stealing some of Woody's regulatory meeting thunder on this one, but this did come through in the last month in the news anyway, that starting February 24, there's going to be a lowering of the income maximum that you can earn as a single or married couple. And that information is kind of sitting right there if you want to kind of absorb that. And also, we've got, in addition to the income caps, we've got a couple of other variables here. Let's see. We've got the clean fuel reward reduced from 1,500 to 750. Maybe Woody can help me with this one. This is in addition to the 2,000 that you might make on a battery electric vehicle, right?
I'd have to look into that. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so at the time that I put this together, I was pretty clear on it, but I think what you'll find is that some cars, just a couple of them, including the Jaguar I-Pace, were within the maximum purchase price, the MSRP, and now they're above it, and so they no longer qualify. But for the most part, the delineation was pretty similar to where it was before. So everyone already knew that they couldn't get this credit for a Model X or something like that. But now a couple more cars are kind of added to that list of cars that are over $45,000.
Sonja, I think the 2,000 that you're remembering became the 1,500. Okay, and that's now becoming 750.
Okay.
I think that's the case. I'm not positive because I think this is what I got for my 2018 Leaf.
I think it's really important for everyone to know that the money, when I think about purchasing, it's like, can you qualify federally and can you qualify at the state level? And is the utility running any programs? And is your air district running any programs? And then you're set. So I know that I think at the end of our slide deck, we have electricforall.org listed as a cool link, and it keeps this information up, which is great.
Yeah, and the purpose here is to steer some of that rebate money to lower income folks, right? So
Absolutely.
There's a certain bulk of money available. And I think there's another slide in the news deck that kind of argues that the market is now picking up where regulation try to steer us. So it's now a market situation, and people that have extra money or ingenuity or interest in this, they're going to buy anyhow, and so they want to have that rebate money available to entice low-income people, maybe with a gas guzzler, or in some other kind of more effective way to move toward electric.
So they lower the rebate. They lower the rebate and expect the less well-off people to still get in on this. I mean, that just seems a little bit odd.
I think, Bernie, that it allows for more families to participate and get a small amount of money. But I agree with you. What we really need is also, something that's makes it a significantly better choice. So it'd be much better if everyone got, more like a total of $12,000. That works in Norway, right? Yeah.
This next slide, I'll speak to, and I'll have to fix this. For some reason, I lost the link after I made the graphic a little bit bigger. The reason Zeno put the slide together, and it wasn't so much about the range comparison. When I read this article on the range comparison, I was blown away by the number of 2022 EV models being offered this year. It was the list. It was the length of the list that surprised me. We've all been doing this long enough and participating in this market long enough that we can remember when this was 6 or 7 cars. Look at the list that's here right now of models being introduced in 2022. This isn't all the EV models. This is just the ones introduced for sale in 2022.
And these are all available across the United States or just in California, or?
I don't know the answer to that question.
It might be a blend.
It might be a blend, yeah.
And with the chip shortage, all of these cars are kind of ready and being produced in small quantities, but also we're kind of just waiting for that, ability to see all of these produced at greater volumes. So there's certainly a restriction.
Yeah, the other statistic right now is demand is far exceeds supply across the board for electric vehicles. So almost any of these will involve long wait times or extra amounts of money you have to pay to order to get the dealer to sell it to you. And it's a real problem. I know of several people who are very, very frustrated about not being able to buy electric cars because of all these things.
And I shouldn't say this while Bruce is on the line and Brad's trying to buy a car. But the whole thing was when I converted my lease on my Leaf and bought it out at the negotiated price from 3 years ago of $12,000. I checked on the web to see what I could sell the car for, and it was in excess of $22,000. So there's such a demand for EVs right now that the used market is just going nuts.
Yeah, right. Now, hopefully in a few years' time, when all these when this big chip problem gets resolved and the supply chains get cleaned up and all that, a lot of electric cars will be flooding into the market, and the problem will go away. But it's going to be a while, I think.
And in fact, this list says to me also that there's not an excuse today for a buyer to say, I can't find an EV that satisfies my need. Now, the prices may be wrong, but other than the prices being wrong, there's just such variety that's being produced. And a lot of SUVs now are coming out on the market as well.
Yeah, this slide also leads to the observation that with internal combustion engines, cars tend to have the same range, around 350, 400. And so the size of the gas tank kind of compensates for the gas guzzler model. And so in electric, there is a different approach here. Range has become a selling point, right? And I kind of wonder whether eventually that will disappear, that all electric cars will have the same range, but the size of the battery kind of compensate for the heaviness of the car or other features that the car may want to have.
Yeah. By the way, I fixed this slide before I publish it so that it does have the link because there's more graphs that were interesting in this article. And I'm sorry that I kind of destroyed something here in doing this.
Great. So I have a personal update on E-Transit cargo vans. I saw 3 of them in San Rafael heading south on the 101, and they each had that blue grill. So I mentioned that in our discussion emails. They had different badging. They were all this dark gray color, but a couple of them, or one of the 3, had extra badging announcing that it was an electric vehicle. And it's possible that it was related to the local story where the wineries are picking up some of these vehicles. So I can talk more about that later. But what seemed to be clear is that these E-Transits, in terms of the fleet vehicles, were now being manufactured in volume. So they've got about 10,000 orders right now from 300 commercial customers. The range is 126 miles. And I think that they're built rather inexpensively. It's the opposite of what you see with SUV, EV kind of, for the personal use kind of thing. They're very base models here. They're estimating 40% reduction in annual maintenance cost. And they've got a 2.4 watt generator that's optional, so you can.
Or stop right there.
Kilowatt. That's kilowatt.
I have to admit, Zeno put the slide together, and then I went back and I read the article and I wrote to Ford. And I said, does anybody review what you publish? I wanted to know how many LEDs they were powering with 2.5 watts.
Yeah. so we all caught that one, but I imagine it's some type of ability to run refrigeration, or why would they put it there?
It's probably supposed to have said 2.4 kilowatts. Is what I'm guessing. But I found a number of other errors in the article that I read, and then it was kind of funny because Ford then popped up saying, "Would you review our article and give a commentary on it and score it?" And I scored it low all the way down and listed all of the errors they had in their article. I said, "Does anybody read what you wrote?"
Maybe someone will read your comments, which would be great. I thought it was our mistake. That's great. One other thing to mention is that Ford had to put a moratorium on all of their assembly lines across all of their plants for the week of February 7, and that included Kansas City. It includes these cargo vans. It includes F-150 Lightnings, and it includes Mach-E's, but it was also including, all of their ICE vehicles as well. So they did not make any cars this week, as I understand, other than I think a couple kept going.
Yeah, and this onboard generator is kind of pointing to an interesting development, that the car becomes more than just a way to get around. And that is a big selling point for this car, that if you you have an engineering business or some contractor business, you can start using your car for all kinds of generating power on small work sites. Or if you are like a Packers fan or some other sports group that has tailgate parties, you can put a big screen TV in the back of your van, or you can do a barbecue. So this is kind of a new, at least for me, it's a new way to think about what a car is. It's not just a way to.
Yeah.
The first place we started seeing this was in the pickup trucks. I mean, certainly Tesla talked about it, and with both 110 and 220. But I've now seen that in all of the new, or many of the new cars, the EV6 included, they include outlets on them, on the exterior of the vehicle that you can access.
It's a big selling point for the F-150 that you can power all this stuff off of this vehicle, and you know, I think it's drawing a lot of that, the interest that exists for that vehicle.
Yeah. At the same time, they're putting those outlets on their gas engine versions because they're learning they need to include them in their electric versions. So it seems to be working backward as well.
I'd like to talk to this one. And I thought this was interesting. And I think you found it, Sonja, right? This I always wondered about, because I always thought, and I looked this up, that the ethanol cycle was a negative energy cycle. That it took more energy to create the corn, process it, and create the ethanol than you got out of it. That turns out not to be the case. In the states of Iowa and Nebraska, I believe, it's actually 4-to-1. That is that you get 4 times as much energy out of the ethanol than it takes for the entire cycle of growing the corn. But across the country, it's 2-to-1. But still, this article went one step further and said, but let's look at the land and see what we could do with the land if we didn't grow the corn. Or if we grew the corn and we put solar panels on the land. And it turned out if you did both, the corn yield was higher. And you got the energy at the same time. And whether you had good weather or bad weather, the farmer still had income regardless. And whereas with the corn cycle, some years you're good and some years you're bad. But I thought the telling one was this, and I'll let you take it from there, Sonja, as far as what the energy yield is compared.
Well, I like that observation that on a per farm basis that you could mitigate your risk by having both solar panels and corn. And, you know, a lot of farmers are pretty wise to those types of decisions. I think that, you know, with the solar panels versus the corn, it was, you know, quite obviously higher. I'm trying to figure out where my metric is on this.
It's right there. It's the second bullet and the third bullet.
Yeah, 551 gallons of ethanol for corn is about, you know, just under 10,000 miles. And then if you've got that same acre on panels, you get, you know, just under 200,000 kilowatt hours. So that's 710,000 miles. So, you know, you're in really great shape there. Another article that was kind of related to this that I recently saw is that the US puts half of their cereal production into fuel, and then a really large portion after that into feeding livestock, and a very small portion into actually eating those cereals directly. You'll see the exact opposite in Portugal or Ghana or Namibia. And so, you know, when you think about our use of these cereals for livestock, you know, eating, and then also on top of that fuel, you've got like a lot of effort going into things that are low value, I guess, or low output.
But also, I thought there was a improvement in the economies, that if you're a farmer and you lease your land to a solar operation, you can get more money out of that lease than you can from growing corn. So actually from and then you could do both, as you said. So you could both get this extra money out of leasing the land, and then you could also get a crop to sell. And it's a much more profitable way to utilize your land in general. It seems like it's
the article said one step further, Lowell, was that the yield per acre, when you had the solar panels on the acre, plus you were growing corn, that the yield of the corn was higher.
Yes, because of the shade. It gets shaded, and the use of water is also less.
Yeah,
because you don't have to waste as much water because the shading of the solar panels.
A lot of interesting ideas.
Yeah, this is interesting, but it's certainly not like a complete discussion of this issue. I mean, this it needs a grid to bring that electricity away, right? And so the question is who's paying for the grid, but also if one farmer does it here and then the other is like 50 miles down the road, that's a complete inefficient way of dealing with this. So if you want to go this way a bit, you need to have probably different governmental intervention, that this is kind of a designated area where this is possible, and that there's a grid that is being supported by public money or so. It's just not that easy, right? It makes it sound like obvious, but there's more to it, it seems.
It would make a good additional session, and so would cargo vans, because we didn't cover those very well. Yeah. So EVs are slated for a big 2022 surge. You heard it here, and we, I think we've all kind of noticed that there's a lot of information kind of suggesting this. A couple things that I'd noticed as well was that, the UK numbers, the numbers in Germany, et cetera, they all seem to be jumping. They seem to be doubling. They went from 6 to 12%, and then they went from 12 to 24%. And so can they hit 50%? And how much of that is the US going to get, considering US has such regressive, policies compared to Europe? So the global sales overall, which might be fueled by or powered by, China and Europe, are projected to surpass 10.5 million this year, which is so much bigger than last year. And nearly 9% of the new cars sold in 2021 worldwide were electric, up from 2.5% in 2019. So there's your doubling maybe every year kind of situation, which isn't going to keep up. But
right, does this graph include plug-in battery powers as well?
I think it does. A lot of these numbers
yes,
are
it does.
Combining battery electric and plug-in hybrid, but not passive hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the last bullet point was interesting, that there's a shift from policy to development to one that is more organic consumer demand. And to me, it raised the question about the club, because it kind of signals a change in our goal, or maybe not the goal itself, but the means to reach that goal. So does this have implications for the programs that the club have? If there's already a strong consumer demand for these cars, do we need to do other things than we used to do? Because some of it was to kind of elicit interest in this type of mobility. And if the market already creates so much interest, and as Noel points out, at the moment it's very hard to get these cars anyhow. So are we having to shift our kind of focus of how we promote electrification of transportation?
And by the way, I put a little note below the third bullet when it talked about $1 trillion. We take these numbers, billions, millions, trillions, casually. Last year, I gave a talk on GHGs and something out of a Bill Gates book. But then I started equating it to silver dollars stacked up. And I started stacking up silver dollars, and then thousands, and then millions, and then billions, and then trillions. And what I came up with when I did trillions was we were able to stack them up and go beyond the orbit of Mars with the height of the silver dollars as a result of stacking up $1 trillion. So we start to see these numbers. And here we have, in the next 5 years, manufacturers intending to spend $500 billion in development of new electric vehicles. That is a tremendous amount of money. It's unbelievable.
All because they want to make more silver dollars. It's
exactly right.
They aren't spending that money for fun or, yeah.
Right. Could I say something?
Oh, go ahead, John.
Go, John.
I mean, it's kind of a big picture thing, and I know that our economy doesn't like to do that, but here's a new industry, looking at a exponential spike in growth and, trillions of dollars, whatever. I don't know how to even start this thinking, but at least we can conceive of the idea that some planning may need to be done ahead of time to try to keep this industry from making the mistakes that the original automotive industry made, which is not investing money in long-term thinking about what this could mean. If we're changing everything, what if we did it right? What if we changed the way we invested, and what if we changed the way we designed vehicles so that, one, they aren't just one-offs to be replaced by new models, that the Hulks are required to be rebuilt by the manufacturers at their expense in order to return them to the market. I don't know, just thinking, if there's $1 trillion out there being invested, it'd be nice if it was thrown into some direction that maybe the manufacturers wouldn't want to do.
John, I think that's a great point, because when I was asked for a comment when I became on the NTC Policy Council, and my comment was one that my wife didn't expect, was that I said, we have a certain set of assumptions that we have about how things work, and we're building on those assumptions. And just recently I started thinking about, people kept talking about changing things. And it occurred to me, well, maybe that was the wrong word to start with in the first place. We need to be replacing things. So first you figure out, what are the new assumptions? And then what do we replace? Because maybe you can't change things. Maybe you just need to replace them with something different.
I like messaging. Yeah. Speaking of replacing things, we've got, I don't know how this came up because I didn't read the article, but, in terms of coal rolling, I don't know, Zeno, if you want to speak to this. We've got policy issues here, right? We've got heavy duty trucks that do not have as much regulation as passenger cars at this time. They aren't part of CAFE standards or any other kinds of standards that are kind of moving them in that area of like trying to replace them with cleaner burning or electric vehicles. And then we also have a lot of independent truckers out there that are on their final miles, rolling coal and shutting down bridges in Canada and things like that. So I don't know if people had some thoughts about, what the right response to this is. But one thought I have as a consumer is that I'd rather see, my goods transported in cleaner ways, and we need to kind of create a little more transparency around how things are moved around in the world. Zeno, is there anything more that you wanted to add here? Or?
Well, yeah, I'm looking again at it. I'm kind of sorry that I associated with coal rolling, which is done more with young guys that have trucks, I think. But certainly when I've seen this, you've seen this, how can this happen, right? This kind of exhaust from big transportation, maybe it's inevitable, the kind of power that they need to pull that wood. I think it's in the back there. Yeah, so I think there's the question is, for example, what reason is it that the federal government is hesitant to push this? Is there like lobbying in the background happening? And these trucks are used probably more continuously, right? And so there maybe there's a hesitation to go to electric because it takes too long to charge them, or it doesn't fit the kind of working, the way they schedule things. So it would be good to kind of have a better insight in this industry and the logistics of it to maybe become, to develop an opinion and foreign policy.
I do think there's a great incentive for people who operate large trucks to convert them to electric. They are going to be much more easy to maintain. They're going to be much more efficient. They are in the business of transporting things for money. And so if it can be demonstrated to them that this is a cheaper way to go about doing it, it will be adopted much more readily than it would be adopted by individuals who are are used to their, used to their ways and like particular vehicles because they've always driven them or whatever. I think the trucking industry is going to be very pragmatic about what's the cheapest way to get the job done.
Yeah, this could be more a fuel cell type electric, right? Where there's hydrogen,
Sure, yeah,
liquid fuel, and that would deal with the refueling kind of bottleneck.
Yeah, all of those technologies may apply more readily to the trucking world than they do to the automobile world.
You'd be surprised at that. I think that there's been some changes in the beliefs of those larger trucking companies and trucking operators about gaseous fuels and including hydrogen, both from an economics, a efficiency, and also from an environmental standpoint. That hydrogen has been in say the last few months really looked at more closely and been seen as not a good solution for trucking industry, to the point where even companies as large as like Triton, which is Navistar's parent company, has come out and said we're not doing hydrogen anymore because it doesn't make economic sense, and it's the technology is not ready, it's not faster, it doesn't meet the needs of most of our customers. And a lot of it they're talking about European customers, but they're also talking about the US customers in terms of larger fleets using this hub spoke model where they're they don't need a 1,000-mile truck. The required brakes for truck drivers are sufficient in that they can get a charge to keep them going and meet the needs of their current runs using battery electric, and that hydrogen is not cheaper, not lighter, not more environmentally friendly. And they're really looking at the technology really closely now and seeing that it's not the rosy future picture that it's been painted to be.
Yeah, Caleb, it's interesting that you said that, because I wasn't going to bring this up, but on that slide, it said that the average mileage in these trucks is 26,000 miles per year. Well, there's 200 work days per year. 226,000 miles per year comes out to about 110 miles per day. And clearly, we know we can load up batteries onto these trucks and have them function for a couple hundred miles a day.
Yeah, easily.
So,
and maybe Caleb will have a comment on the Maersk position of moving some of their container ships over to, they're replacing them, they're not converting them, they're replacing ships with ones that run on methanol or ammonia. And their goal is to get to a carbon neutral stance by 2040. And this carbon neutral stance does include their indirect emissions as well as their direct emissions. Yeah. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. And I would, this is a completely different conveyance, pushing against water, which is really hard. And I know that they've kind of done a lot to slow down their ships as well, to try to not use as much fuel, which I think is just amazing that they are so motivated economically to figure this out, but are also somewhat motivated to hit these carbon targets. Do you know much about methanol or ammonia, Caleb?
So a lot of the methanol ammonia systems in a ship size. I mean, they're basically talking about using it as a. It kind of breaks down to almost like a fuel cell type of system, but you need to have it in a power plant size system to be efficient enough to make it worthwhile. And a cargo ship certainly meets that sort of criteria. I think their long-term view needs to be, it's good that they're looking at it end to end, because you need to look at the sources that, the methanol and the ammonia, to ensure that you're not just pulling it out of the ground like we are with hydrogen now. Most of hydrogen is produced through fossil fuels. It's like, before we start looking at converting anything to hydrogen, we should probably start looking at how we're going to make hydrogen an actual green fuel.
Actually green. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this goal is not zero carbon transportation. It's to be carbon neutral. So some of this is by offsets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And offsets are kind of tricky because I mean, there's a whole discussion about offsets. For some people, it's greenwashing and unsure and stuff like that. So I think the other thing is that here, some of it's market pressure from the big, like Amazon. They want to have these goals. Apple wants to have these goals. So they pressure their transportation sector to fit in with their own like carbon neutral goals.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock and I want to keep moving us forward here. And I think we only have 1 or 2 slides left, so we can wrap those up and then get into the presentation.
So, you know, I think people were kind of aware that there was this big snowstorm in which everyone was kind of stranded in their cars, and there was a comment made by a writer at the Washington Post that alleged that you know, this would have been much worse if everyone was in an electric car. And so several different outlets tried to actually prove that point and see, you know, or disprove that point. And I think the response actually was kind of strong enough that this was a teachable moment, that actually you can sit in an electric car and not use up very much power and be quite comfortable over a pretty long period of time and not lose that much range either. So the last point is that Car and Driver, you know, tested this out in a Model 3 in 15-degree weather and realized they could stay at 65 degrees for over 45 hours. You just don't get to know up front. And so you need to know that somebody has done it before.
Yeah, well, they're gonna have to open the door and go potty before that too. So
that's true. Yeah, there's a couple of real world situations that they might not have modeled out. Avoiding blackouts with clean energy. What do we want to say about this one?
I can cover it real fast. And basically, it was a study because there's been many studies now. We can't do this with green energy. It's not possible to support this. Stanford's done a study now. Carnegie Mellon came back with a study about 5 years ago saying, yeah, you can't use renewables in order to power everything. It's not sustainable. It's not possible to do. Stanford just finished doing exactly a comparable study, used regions of the country and individual states, and came back and said that we can do it. It's a combination of offshore wind turbines, rooftop, which requires no new land, onshore wind turbines with land, utility scale solar, and utility scale solar, concentrated solar, where you aim the sun at something, heat it up, blah, blah, blah. In any case, their calculation says it's possible to do, and we'd be able to avoid blackouts in California in the summertime. I just thought it was an interesting study. This is the video we saw at the front of our presentation. And we're going to skip input from the peanut gallery because you've been inputting all along. And if we have some more time after the presentation, then we'll come back to that. Sonja, do you want to take control, or do you want me to just push the button for you?
Oh, you can push the button, Jerry. I've got a couple notes up here on another screen. I think
okay.
Fine. And Dave Heacock's going to backfill me because this has been a really fluid situation to talk about EV light duty trucks or pickups, EV pickups, if you want to call them. Things are really moving fast. And, some of these trucks are not available, so they're announcing new things about them as they kind of reposition themselves. So we'll try to fill in. So what is a light duty truck? I think it's helpful to kind of know what the government definition of a light duty truck is. It weighs up to 8,500 pounds. And so as an example, an F-250 weighs 5,700 pounds right now. In 1999, it was 1,400 pounds lighter than that. So light duty trucks weigh up to 8,500. That's pretty big. An F-250, I had one of those in my driveway for a while. They're huge. And their payload capacities are up to 4,000 pounds. So, these are kind of the standard work truck in the US, and they're pretty big. So they're number one in the US in terms of overall sales. The F-150 or the F series is number one in the US, but that's really driven by the flyover states. it's really driven by the center of the country where the area is more rural. And I'm interested to see, where the actual EV light duty truck sales are going to be coming from. Are they going to be replacing F-Series in Montana, or are they going to be additional trucks and purchases that people are making in California or something like that? So why are legacy manufacturers making EV trucks? I don't know the answer, but the question is, what are they doing with this truck manufacturing? And they are combining them with passenger car miles per gallon to meet CAFE standards. So where you might have found that GM was making Chevy Sparks in compliance mode for specific states, they may not have to do that kind of compliance car kind of thing anymore, because if they get some of their trucks manufactured as battery electric vehicles, as of 2014, they can kind of combine that with their passenger cars and come up with their CAFE standard minimums or maximums. So any questions or comments or additions on that?
Well, I had a question, because batteries add weight to a car, right? So if there is a limit to how heavy a light duty truck can be, have you seen any evidence that this creates a redesign or pressure to change the limits or anything like that?
I haven't, and I think that some of these first EVs that we're seeing in the truck mode, they're slightly smaller in a couple ways. Each manufacturer has taken that goal a little differently, but they do have smaller truck beds and smaller payloads. So we can get into that, but I think that they're not challenging themselves that much yet. And they're definitely bringing them in under that light duty weight.
That's actually a very interesting question by itself. And even the definition question is a good one, because in many cases, and Caleb, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the reason that they have these thresholds is that the size of the engine now starts corresponding with the size of the vehicle. And that size of the engine now starts corresponding with the amount of pollution that it was generating. And so that's why the reason for the thresholds was that I needed this big a power plant in order to do this. So it was a combination of all of that. This may become an anachronism, because with the EV, you get the bigger power plant. You're not going to pollute any more than you did before. You may impact the roads a little more because of your weight. But as far as what you're doing to the environment, it doesn't impact it all that much as you scale up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just as a reference, so the F-150 Lightning, which is essentially the same footprint as a regular F-150, weighs about 1,500 pounds more than a standard F-150. And I think once you, in comparison, the Rivian, which is actually slightly smaller technically than an F-150, that weighs almost 2,000 pounds more. So
it has better range.
It has better range. Yeah.
More battery.
Yeah.
And
but
that all is bad news for people on bicycles, on people that walk on the street, because the weight of what hits you determines, to a large extent, besides the speed, it determines kind of how injured you will be. So there's still, besides environmental, there's certainly a public health issue in the fact that these cars become heavier and heavier. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to kind of be aware of that, and maybe even try to kind of act on that, or push for transportation that is good for everybody, like a complete street kind of vision for transportation, rather than just electrify everything.
So, and Zeno, I don't know, I have a hard time visualizing that the 4,500 pound car that hit me at 25 miles an hour is going to do less damage than the 8,500 pound truck that hits me at 25 miles an hour. They both seem like it's the same amount of damage. I don't really care which one hits me. I don't want either one.
Were you
Yeah.
wearing your helmet?
I guess the point I would make to that is, there's certain safety requirements around stopping distances, and I haven't done the comparison, but it would be interesting to see how, like the Ford Lightning is a perfect example. It's like you can take an F-150 standard gas vehicle and a electric Lightning and just compare the stopping distance, because that's what's really important. If they're going to react, that and automated stopping systems, which are getting better and better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I think part of what is concerned about, I'm also concerned about, is that trucks are very appealing, and in urban environments, and when they're adopted by people who don't really particularly need them, they contribute to the escalation of kind of just the size and kind of burden on manufacturing that our conveyances have. And with trucks, there's a real emotional connection, and there's something that's going on that kind of dates back to the 1950s as cars became really popular and trucks became really popular as part of people's identity. And there was a really interesting New Yorker article that talked about truck identity, and there's a link here. 3 out of 4 people name their truck, and Ford knows this. Ford said, Ford provided this information, and 15% have a truck tattoo. So I just couldn't believe that. I was like, so that might mean that of all Ford truck purchasers, 15% of those surveyed had a truck tattoo. That might be kind of the biggest one, but whatever it is, that's a lot of truck tattoos out there, you guys. But, kind of going back to the top of the screen, obviously, trucks are really necessary. If I need new siding on my house, I need someone to bring plywood here and put it up for me too. We use it for towing. We use it for hauling toys. We use it. I see a lot of people with school-age kids. They combine those school-age kids together, and they take 4 or 5 of them at once to sporting events and things like that. And then it used to be that we all needed someone with a truck to move or go get a big screen TV or something like that. And so there's that friends helping kind of thing. So, as much as we like to talk about policy, I thought, let's get real about what people really like and what they want to be able to say that they can do. I'm set up to help my friend or whatever. So that brings me to my personal statement about trucks. When I was 11 years old, I moved to Montana. And when I was 12, I started driving. And like any good Montana kid, I knew how to drive by the time I was 13. And I was driving very slowly across ranch fields and throwing bales of hay out to the cattle. And so this is the town I grew up in. There's 700 people in it. And it's like 2 blocks long, main drag with 2 bars and a barber shop. And everybody's got an outfit or a vehicle, which is what they called it then in the 70s. And, they're all trucks. And we had a Ford Bronco, and people used to get so mad at us because the wheel width was slightly narrower than a pickup truck. So whether you had a Ford or a Chevy, you could all drive in the same ruts. But if you had a Bronco, you weren't very helpful at all. But I thought before we move off, I just thought we could take a minute, if any one or two of you have a story about a connection, do you regret not owning a truck now, or do you keep one because of this?
I want to know if anybody has a tattoo of their electric car.
There's a thought.
Well, I mean, we all know that trucks are a very cultural thing, right? So if you go to Italy or the Netherlands, people don't have trucks. And so it is part of our lingering frontier mentality, I think.
Yep.
We still connect with land and hauling stuff around. And culture has kind of organized around that, right? So, but on the whole, I think they often see one guy in a truck or one woman in a truck, and they go to work or they use it for purposes that the truck is not really built around for, right? So it's a very cultural thing.
Yeah, well, my observation is a lot more people own trucks than actually need trucks. That for the, for what it costs them to own the truck, for the fuel cost and all the other extra downsides, they don't really get that much benefit out of. But they like the trucks, and one of the reasons they like the trucks is because they're bigger than other cars, and they think that if they get in an accident, they'll win.
Yeah, and there's that. So,
John,
I just had to add that we my daughter and I converted our little red Toyota truck, and the one that's coming back to life, and we named it Val. So that does have a name, and we're part of that culture.
Where's your daughter's tattoo?
No tattoo.
No tattoo. Yeah, and I noticed that the picture here on the left shows a small white truck that's kind of similar to John's electric truck. It's a smaller, older size, and it's right next to that bigger red one, which is that Chevy Z series or whatever. And so they've gotten a lot bigger over time. And living in that town, I got to be an observer from New England who was kind of on the outside looking in, but I also got it. You can fit a lot of bales of hay in that red truck.
Well, and I have to admit, in previous life, I had a truck also. And the primary use was to haul manure away and to pick up alfalfa. And you can cantilever the bales of alfalfa over the side and then go higher, and you can get 15 bales into a really small truck.
I'm a retired engineer and like to think I'm somewhat practical. So my last pickup was in the late 70s. And but since then I have various SUVs with a trailer hitch on it. And so if I need to haul something, because I don't have a ranch, I don't have any cowboy boots or anything, but I do like to go fishing and that kind of stuff. And so I don't personally own a trailer, but a friend has one, and it's a lot easier to put plywood in that trailer because it's much bigger than the bed of a pickup, and especially today's beds of pickups. A lot of those are all crew cabs with a little 5-foot bed on them or so.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, a lot of them don't work that way. So moving on to actual models and availability. This is, I think this is going to be like a little bit more of a depressing story than an uplifting story. There aren't that many trucks available right now that you could go out to a dealer and purchase. The Rivian R1T is in production in really small numbers right now. And they started delivering last fall to their employees. And by now, if you were an early reservation holder, you might be lining up to get an R1T. The Ford F-150 Lightnings are available in spring of 2022. And I think that there are a few that are being manufactured right now, including some fleet deliveries and things like that. But again, you'd need to be an early reservation holder to see an F-150 Lightning this year. And then the GMC Hummer EV, which is over $100,000, is also in production right now. And I think because you'd be giving them so much money, they might build you one this year. But I don't know what the reservation situation is for the Hummers. The Chevy Silverado has reservations on it, and they're in pre-production, and they're still, kind of announcing new things about the Silverado and lining themselves up to be in position against Ford for their RST electric vehicle. And then the Cybertruck, they had deferred, Tesla basically said, hey, we're not going to build out a lot of our new models because we're in constraint right now, and that doesn't make sense. Bollinger and Canoe have been doing very poorly. I think out of these last three, maybe Lordstown will rise from the ashes somehow and start to produce trucks, and we'll learn more about that later. Does anyone have something else to add in terms of models I might have missed? Or
what strikes me is doesn't seem to be any prospect of lightweight pickup trucks like half-ton pickups in our immediate future. And that's the kind of thing I would be interested in. That's what would be a useful pickup for my situation as a person who owns a bunch of land and needs to get a load of compost or take away some refuse or something. That's the kind of truck I'd buy, and I don't see it coming.
Well, let John build you one.
Yeah, John can build you one, or we can hope that they'll electrify the Maverick, because the Maverick has a lot of orders and is very popular in the ICE form, and that might happen. The other thing is that when we get over into like kind of a van style, you can look forward to the VW ID Buzz, but that's not a truck.
But I have another comment. I'd like to make another comment, because like Lowell, he has a need for a light pickup, but the guy who comes and trims my trees and stuff, he has a dumping trailer. It costs him about $5,000 here locally in Santa Rosa. The thing goes up and it'll dump all the crap out, and it's really nice, and it holds a lot. And
I have one right out here right now, Mark, and they loaded it up, and they have wood sides on it now too to get the trash off to the dump. But earlier they brought back 2 yards of sand, and then he hit the button and dumped the sand in my driveway. And
let's keep an eye on the specs on these trucks and see what we'd want in an electric vehicle that would be able to haul, because hauling a trailer is the same as some of the hauling that these trucks would do, right?
Yeah, there's kind of a parallel topic in the transport biking world, right? So you've seen more and more e-bikes that are have a transport function.
Yep.
And,
So,
and actually, I've had a reservation for a Lightning for quite a long time, but they still don't, as far as I know, tell me what number I am. But they sent out a message saying, they were way over, sold for what they're going to produce in 2022.
Oh, interesting that you don't know where you stand in order.
Right.
But happy to hear that, Mike. I was curious to know if anyone on our group, had a reservation. Will you keep reporting back and let us know?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
But you're probably going to cover it. But I think the only thing I really know is what was in the PD about the local wineries that got some units. So if you're
gonna cover that, aren't you, Sonja?
Yeah, I'll tell that story next if you like. First, just in terms of the reservation situation, what I did find online, and I don't know if Mike has more, is that the early reservation holders, they've got nearly 200,000, and then they just kind of closed it. And so Mike's in and the rest of us are out. They think that they have 75% new to the brand that are holding these reservations, and 25% replacing a gas F-150. And then somehow of that same group, 40% are current EV owners and 11% are Tesla owners. So, with 40% being current EV owners, that does not match the United States map that shows F-150s, are popular in the center of the country. So that tells me that the coasts are buying these trucks because they already have experience with EVs, possibly. And then with the Rivian R1T going to early reservation holders since last fall, they're a little slower. Like, they're not going to be able to produce quite as fast as Ford is on the Lightnings. They've got over 1,000 delivered now and 71,000 reservations. And that Rivian is a little more expensive and has a bigger range, which we'll get into. And then Tesla had a reservation system. They're good at reservation systems, but they've got that on hold as well.
How does the cargo tunnel work?
Oh, it's awesome. So basically what they're doing is they're opening doors on either side, and you can buy a slide out kitchen as an add-on. So you've got these two doors, and you can kind of stuff golf clubs in there or other things. But they do have kind of like a drawer kitchen with a little hot, like an induction burner, and maybe it has a fridge. I can't recall.
$5,000.
$5,000, yeah.
Yep.
but you can see that there's not much bed left after the cargo tunnel and how short the truck is, but we'll get into that. So I don't have a slide on this, but right at this point, I was going to talk about this local winery situation. So it was just 2 weeks ago that Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, came to Dutton Goldridge Winery right here in Sebastopol and talked about how Dutton Goldridge Winery and 2 other wineries, which I can't recall right now, locally.
Dutton is one of them.
Yeah, Dutton's one of them, and then there's one up in Healdsburg, and they are participating in a pilot fleet study, and that pilot fleet study involves providing each of those wineries with Ford E-Transit Connect vans, which might have been the ones I'd seen, and also Ford F-150 Lightnings and some charging station equipment at each of these 3 wineries. And what I found interesting was that Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce.com, was there as well. And they talked a little bit about tracking the fleets and tracking the fleets for recall. And so what that told me is that, Salesforce is a customer relationship management software company. And that means that Salesforce is probably partnering with Ford to manage the ownership of each of these vehicles and manage, there's a cute guy there, managing the ownership of the vehicles and also managing any of the recall notices that need to go out. I don't know who's doing over-the-air software updates for Ford, and I don't know.
And when I post the deck and the presentation at the end, there is one slide which we skipped over in the presentation, which has more details on the relationship and the deal in Sonoma County.
Great, yeah. So, I thought that possibly, depending on when the F-150 Lightnings were rolling off the line, that they announced this and just delivered the Transit Connect van so far. Because I didn't really see a lot of beautiful pickup truck pictures in wineries yet from that announcement. But, it was very interesting. I thought, who wouldn't want this nice backdrop for.
Well, and Dutton had one statistic, which was an interesting one in the article, which was that they spend $5,000 a month on gasoline to run the trucks through the vineyards.
And
so they were looking to save that $5,000 a month.
Yeah. And I thought it was really interesting that they talked about how they basically need to hook those small trailers with the porta potties, on them and move them around into each of the vineyards. Yeah. So the F-150, Dave is going to help me with this one. We've got a lot of little detail, and
did we lose Dave? I don't see him up there.
Sorry?
I think oh, there he is. I'm sorry. You just moved.
Can you see me? I'm having
I'm
getting intermittent things here saying I'm having internet connect problems. I don't know what that's about. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine now, Dave. You're good now. So I can kick us off, and Dave, you can let me know if we miss anything here. We had a few other stats on the F-150. I chose this picture because the massive frunk in the front there is kind of this very compelling and new feature that obviously an ICE engine can't offer. The frunk of the F-150 basically has drain holes, so you can use it as your cooler. And it also, it opens up in a way where you are, directly accessing the space and can slide groceries in and things like that. And
tools.
And tools. and you can plug things in. There's outlets in that front. So you can have a really cool front gate.
So you could fill it with ice and put your beer in there?
Directly, yes. You can fill it with ice and put your beer in there. And I guess there might be like a little something to add to the front to keep the ice from flowing out, because it's really directly accessible, which is kind kind of cool. So the F-150 starting from the beginning here is a 230 mile range, $40,000 truck. And then there's a 300 mile range truck that with add-ons goes all the way up to $90,000. I don't know yet if they're going to do that kind of Tesla thing where you can only really get the more expensive one and not the base model right away. I have a feeling that they're going to put out a range of versions for people, but a lot of people buy these limited versions that are really souped up, and that'll come with the 300 mile range. The DC fast charge rate is 150 kilowatts. And you can see the horsepower, torque, and 0 to 60 numbers right here. The power pack, I think, is kind of interesting. They're trying to do quite a bit with the power pack on board, and I believe that what this means is that you can basically use it as your generator. It will run out through the outlets. I don't know exactly what kind of connectivity it has for higher powers. Like, can you?
Yeah. So the rear has a it's basically a generator socket, like a 220 twist lock generator socket that you would be able to hook into a junction that you would normally put a generator on. So you can hook it directly into your house.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I just saw something and it's not quite that simple from what I just watched this week on Inside EVs.
Uh-huh.
And it's they were talking like $8,000 to $10,000.
Yeah, it's an option that you have to opt in for the truck, but with the option at the tailgate on the left side, you basically get a panel that has, I think it has like either 4 or 6 outlets, and one of them, if you get that high power option, it has basically it's basically a plug that you would normally see on a generator, and then you just have to turn it on.
So I don't know if Ford has a build your truck feature now, but if they have one in the future, we'll be able to kind of put a finer point on, where between $40,000 and $90,000 is that power pack.
What's the weight of the car?
I saw the weight of this vehicle is like 6,500 pounds, and one of the articles I was looking at says they weigh as much as World War II tanks these days.
6,500.
But the
6,500.
The thing I found interesting in a number of these trucks was this power pack idea. And I know for a medium-sized motorhome, you can, run the system off a 300 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt inverters, 3,000 watt inverters, and these things are like 3 times that. So if I had one of these trucks, I could plug it into my motorhome and then have a whole basic place to live.
Yeah,
just kind of interesting. Are you done with this slide, or I had
sorry, I just moved you up. I moved you forward, but it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Keep going, Dave.
One of the things I warn people about is they do more and more of these studies, but these towing capacities are great, except that I think everybody is realizing that the range capability is dropping as much as 50%. So if you're looking at 230 miles and thinking you're going to tow a trailer with it, you might be only getting, 120 or 30 miles with it.
Yeah, I actually shared a range test with the Rivian R1T, and they were towing in Boulder, Colorado. So they were doing kind of a torture test up a mountain, but they went down the other side, and they got about 135 miles.
Yeah.
Well, this is to some extent true with gasoline engines too.
Sure.
Also, that you get a lot worse, fewer miles per gallon when you tow a very large load.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now this 10,000 pound towing capacity, does that mean that the train that they demo it with was only a 10,000 pound train?
Yeah, I don't know, but you put a big trailer on the back of that, weighs 5,000 to 6,000 pounds or something. You're not going to get that kind of mileage out of it. Sonja mentioned the beds on these things, and I think on the Ford, it's about 5.5 feet. And it was kind of interesting to look at some of the differences as we go through. I got a couple of the bed lengths. So,
okay, you want me to move forward on the slides?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The last thing on the Ford is that they're using SK Innovations for their batteries. So with the Rivian, they've got a 314 mile range truck for 67.5.
Oh.
And their DC fast charging rate, is a real differentiator, depending on what kind of fast charging access you might have in the future. So basically this truck is kind of like it doesn't have kind of a baseline version as much. It's a little bit more of a polished version from, a dedicated electric vehicle company that doesn't have much of a track record. But people really like the style of it. It has a much shorter, sportier bed. I think when they first designed it, they were kind of thinking that that's going to work out okay for them because it's not going to be as much a work truck adoption type vehicle. It was going to be more of in that near luxury class. So the payload and the towing capacity are a little bit better than the Fords, right? And with the shorter truck bed, you basically are going to have to kind of pull a trailer to do too much with it. But they're kind of marketing it as more of an outdoorsy vehicle, and they've started a charging network with different national park sites and scenic sites and things like that. It sounds like it's just going to be kind of a small complementary network to promote the idea that you could get further out into rural scenic areas, that sort of thing.
So I have a question on the charging network. Why is it these guys think they need to have their own charging networks? Is it because they want to make sure they have at least 200 kilowatt, or?
This is not a network at all, really. I think it's more of a promotional network to try to extend out in areas that so say they're going to put a couple hundred of these charging stations out at national parks and scenic sites. I think they're thinking that it's just complementary. And then with Ford, they're just claiming the network that exists.
Okay, because with Ford, they claim 64,000 plugs.
Yeah, there's like Electrify America plugs, and there's ChargePoint plugs, and they are creating relationships to combine, like the way Nissan did. I think that they're going to create relationships so that you might have a Ford charging card, and from your Ford membership, be able to kind of pay ChargePoint or pay Electrify America or something like that.
But they're not really different plugs. I mean, you can plug into these other things. It's just that you're not going to be allowed to use them unless you have a subscription or what have you.
Right. Okay.
It uses a CCS standard. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
let me clarify something. What's a waiting height?
I would need a 210 kilowatt charger or more to take advantage of the 210 kilowatt fast charging rate. Right.
Yeah.
And as with any of that, you'd have to have. If I had a 350, that'd be fine because it's 210. But I mean, all that stuff I think is not something that your average car truck buyer understands, and I think it's really important because the rate at which you fast charge has a lot to do with how quickly you will travel from point A to point B, because it's going to shorten the time that you spend charging your car, and that's what a lot of people care about.
I like your point, Lowell, because I a couple of weeks ago I rented a Model Y long range and drove it to the Bay Area, and when you're looking at the charging rate, you can switch between percentage and power and miles added. And I thought the miles added was a much better indicator for those that might not. It was easier to understand. It was in a measure that people see all the time, and it's like at over 150 kilowatts, it's, it's adding 600 to 800 miles an hour. And, at 210 kilowatts, depending on the efficiency of the vehicle, I mean, you could be adding 1,200 miles an hour. And it's,
And so it follows then that a 150 kilowatt car, let's say, charges at half the rate of a 300 kilowatt car, right? I mean, that it's proportional. It actually is twice as fast if it's twice as much, right?
Right. Yeah. But what is it?
Really I want to go off the charging, because we've talked about the charging in general in other places too. So I want to know what waiting height is. Does this mean this is a truck designed for Iceland's highways?
I have that answer for you. It's 7,148 pounds and 78 inches tall.
And your 3-foot waiting height is how much standing water you can drive it through.
Okay, fine. So that's why I asked about Iceland, because I was just
blown
away
height.
on the buses in Iceland. You drive through a river, as part of the highway.
Yeah.
Shall we go to the next
waiting
slide?
height, terribly important for creeks.
So these numbers are kind of promotional numbers, right? How they promote this car. And so I pointed already out that the weight of the car is not a promotional item. So it's not really, you have to dig it up. It's not easily available. But I would want to know, for example, okay, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. What about 60 to 0 in how many feet?
Nobody asked that question.
But that's certainly for a traffic engineer and kind of somebody who's concerned about the overall mobility, that could be a number that is also interesting, right?
Yeah. It's a good point. Like, they don't tell you stopping distance, but we can Google that and see what we've got on it and see if we can.
Stopping distance is what it turns out to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm moving you forward, Sonja, so you can get through your whole presentation.
Yeah. Those two trucks basically are the closest to available, and the rest of these are really kind of off the charts in different ways. So we'll cover them more quickly. Yeah. The Hummer EV seen here parked directly behind a Silverado is showing you that it's a really large truck. This one, where the Rivian had kind of like 4 hub mounted motors, which is kind of cool. This one actually has all 4 wheels that will turn. And so promotionally, they've been showing videos where it can kind of crab walk or move in the sideways direction, which I'm sure is very important for 4-wheel driving. So they delivered one in December, and we're still waiting for January results. So
did I get this right? 59,000 reservations, $110,000 a vehicle.
Yep.
That's billions of dollars worth of vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an expensive, when you see it, it's just amazing to me when you see like a young guy in a new huge truck. I'm like, what happened there? I don't know. That's an $800, $1,000 a month car payment, right?
Yeah.
There might be hope on that. I saw one article of the base model in 2024, which is a long ways off, might be about 80,000. So it's a lot more affordable, right?
There you go.
For some people.
Yeah.
So I know we've kind of moved past this, but back to Zeno's stopping distance and kind of that performance metric. I just found an Edmunds article where they tested the Rivian versus a conventional Dodge Ram, a Honda Ridgeline, and a Ram 2500, so like a large vehicle. And of all of them, the Rivian, despite being almost the second heaviest, has the shortest stopping distance. So it performs better despite the fact that it's heavier than most of the other vehicles in the comparison. So.
Yeah, and we'll assume that it has auto braking as well, right?
Yeah.
So the GMC Silverado is the counterpart to the Ford F-150. And so GM is doing a similar thing where they're taking their current, best-selling Silverado kind of style and making an electric version of it. It seems like they're very interested in bringing this in at $40,000, as Dave was reminding me. The $40,000 mark is kind of key. But they really aren't going to be delivering these until spring of 2023 for fleet customers first, and then in 2024 for individuals.
That's probably constrained by their battery cells, right? Because they have to bring those factories up.
I would think so. So this is another Ultium cell kind of product, just like the other Chevys that are coming out, and they've had these these work stoppages around chips, but also the battery pack issues as well.
I see the 350 kilowatt DC charging on this. I'd love somebody to give a talk sometime on DC for the vehicles and why the vehicles have a DC charging constraint. Is it just have to do with wire size? Does it have to do with something else? How that fits. That's kind of mystery meat to me.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this has been a pretty fluid situation where, in particular, the Silverado, just this week, they had, a couple new announcements about what this truck can do. And I'm just checking my notes because I think they just announced that it's available with a range extender that you can toss into the back of the truck. So this truck is going to be the only electric truck with that also you can plug a gas range extender into. So the Lordstown Endurance. So Lordstown in Ohio has had a couple of false starts and rearrangements in their corporate structure, but they've been trying to get this truck out the door. They were in the running to produce U.S. Postal Service mail trucks, and they were quite disappointed when they lost that bid to Oshkosh. The Endurance here features a battery pack of 109 kilowatt hours, around 250 miles of range. They still say they're going to be shipping these this year, and the price will be starting from $52,500, but we don't have a lot more information. There are many prototypes that were built. Same with the Tesla Cybertruck. The prototypes were built. I think you can call Tesla a more established electric vehicle company now. And when they do it, they'll do it. And it may or may not look like this. I'm not sure. So I assume that it's hard. Like one thing I made a point about was that if they're going to these lithium ion phosphate batteries, those are big and heavy, right? And then they were talking about this being a 500-mile range truck. And so now they've got possibly an engineering issue with the weight of the batteries and the type of truck they thought they were going to be building.
Yeah, but the big and heavy, the heavy distance is this. The lithium iron phosphate is about 15% heavier than NMC. But the BOS, the balance of system, that is all of the cooling, everything else, turns out to be substantially lighter. And so I think they're probably trying to figure out where they're going to be with that. I bet you they end up maybe 5 to 7% heavier, and that's well within, and so they won't lose much range.
How much is a truck? When I look at it, I wouldn't guess this is a truck. So what does this?
So I can explain, Zeno, that behind that kind of angled back area, it does have a bed, and then that bed actually has a lid that can slide down. So it's ultimately it might end up being a smaller truck. Yeah.
Supposedly, there's videos that you can watch, on this to see how they envisioned it and why they didn't go for the different geometry just because they wanted a different geometry, although maybe that was the case. But in reality, they said, what do you want a truck to do? And they said, what geometry do you need in order to do that? And they didn't come up with the beds that we have today or the design that we have today. So they wanted to do a number of different things. And there's a kind of a flashy demo where Elon Musk shows also how strong the windows are, but they forgot to tell him they didn't put the real windows in. And he puts his sledgehammer right through the window.
Yeah, they put some really strong windows in some of them, but not that one maybe.
Yeah, not that one.
And they, so they have built, a handful of prototypes, and there have been some comments also that, this is not a passenger-friendly truck. You would not want to be hit by this truck. It has a lot of angles, and things might have to change that way as well. Bill?
Yeah, Sonja. Okay, looking at a lot of these pickup trucks, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm waiting for mechanics to come to work on my 1950 pickup truck today, which is a tiny. It's called a small half-ton. I'm looking at all the beds of these new trucks, and it doesn't look like you can slide the 8-foot piece of plywood or home siding into any of them.
That's a great question, because
I'm just wondering if there
is a mid gate on one of these trucks. So, and I forgot to mention, so I'm with you. Usually what you want is a 4-foot by 8-foot area to slide a piece of plywood in. And so I think if we go back, Dave, maybe you can help me remember, but there's a truck with a mid gate, and it might be actually the GMC Silverado's contemplation, but the idea of a mid-gate requires a unibody. You can't have like the cab separated from the bed, and I imagine your older truck has like a completely separated bed, and you can never open a door from the bed into the cab. But with these unibody trucks, you can open a gate along the front end of the bed back into the cab, and extend that space so that you could get like a little bit more lumber in and stuff like that. And so they really are thinking that. The other way they're thinking about that is that you can fold the gate down and have a small lip on the back end of the back gate. Mm-hmm. And so they're thinking about that issue, and they're trying to extend the usefulness of the truck's bed to put like a kayak or a piece of
as long as the wheel well doesn't go into the bed, and as long as the bed is 4 feet wide.
Well, the interesting enough, the bed on the Tesla says it's 6.5 feet, but like Sonja was saying, on the Silverado, they're claiming with this multi-flex mid-gate, you can, on a pass-through, it can hold 10-foot long items in it.
Wow.
Okay.
See how that works. I don't know. But with 6.5 feet on the Tesla, you only got 1.5 feet hanging over on the outside there for an 8-foot piece of plywood.
And they might have done a lip on the gate to think about that 8 feet as well. Some of them are doing that. So real quick, unfortunately, the canoe it looks really cute, but they may or may not really be solvent anymore. They just lost a couple of vice presidents this week, and their focus was going to be on a panel van, so it'd be a little bit more like the Ford E-Transit. And also they're looking at fleets. I think there are a couple of these companies that are thinking we could build a bunch of these and do replacement for fleets. So we don't really have anything for that. So shall we wrap up really fast? I know that's abrupt. Does anyone have other questions about the trucks? Because I think Dave.
Yeah, I was looking for your next slide, and I didn't realize you didn't have a closing slide. It is abrupt.
Yeah. But yeah, so in terms of any questions,
John, you had a question?
Yeah.
Well, I think I remember when the Rivian first came out and was doing their publicity for their trucks, wasn't it Rivian that was showing a truck that was more of a Jeep kind of thing with a completely through front to rear passageway for long lumber? Was that Rivian?
That was Bollinger.
Bollinger, you're right. What happened to Bollinger?
Their focus is exclusively on commercial vehicles now, so they're no longer going to do their B1, B2 production vehicles for passengers.
Okay.
I didn't even cover them. Yeah, they just like don't have that truck in mind. Bill?
Wait, you're on mute, Bill.
I'm just saying thank you and goodbye.
Okay, very good.
So do these smaller companies have their own facilities to put that car together, or how does that work?
Well, I know that Lordstown has an Ohio plant and Rivian has an Illinois plant. And these are former plants owned by legacy automakers.
All right, well, I'm going to move us forward then because we're at our time. And I've been chastised for not holding well on time. And I pointed out when we were in the room, we always had the clock over the speaker. So we could always tell when it was 11 o'clock, when it was 12 o'clock and whatever. I haven't changed any of the links since last time. As Sonja pointed out, there's a couple of links here that make it easier for you to find out what EVs are available and what they can do. Next time, which will be March the 12th, because this is one of the 4-week Februarys, so we get the same date. It will be Wooding talking on legislative update and whatever news articles we have in the meantime. And I thank you all for attending, and it's been great to see you all. And I still look forward to us having meetings in person. I'd love to get it, by the way, consider if you want to work on how to create the hybrid meetings going forward. And it'd be great to put a team together to do that and come back with a recommendation. All right, guys.
I'd love. All right, talk soon.
Good to hear you're feeling better, Jerry.
Yeah, well, I feel a lot better. And thank you, Sonja and David and Zeno for jumping in and doing a lot of talking today.
Nice presentation, Sonja.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.